This is the Creative Funding Show, a podcast for authors, YouTubers, and podcasters who want to fund the work they love.
Hello, creators. This is Thomas Umstadt, your host, and today we don't have a guest. Today is a deep dive on how to email patrons a thank you automatically. So Patreon doesn't actually have a way to do this built in, so we're going to deep dive on how to do it. But first I want to talk a little bit about why this is important. The reason this came up is that in my novel marketing podcast Patreon account, we have a lot of goodies, a lot of rewards that we give our patrons on Patreon right away. And right now we have to send that email by hand, which means if it's over a weekend or during a holiday, sometimes it's days and days before a patron gets that email that we have crafted for them. And as we are getting patrons faster and getting more patrons, crafting those emails is a lot of work. And so I'm like, there's got to be an easier way. And there isn't within Patreon's system, but I have found an easier way, or at least a way to automate it. And that's going to walk you through doing that. Now, the other reason why this is important is that this is your opportunity to pull your patrons out of Patreon and subscribe them onto your email list. It's really important to have an email list. This gives you freedom if Patreon were to go down for some reason. You'd be able to email all your patrons, or if you wanted to move to a different service, you can move to another service. One of the cool things about Patreon is that it lets you get these email addresses out of Patreon and kind of take your fans with you. But you want to do it. And the only way to do it, or the best way to do it, is an automated way. And that's what I'm going to be teaching you. For those of you who are very tech savvy, you may not need to listen to this episode. I'm going to give you the TLDR version. So the short version is you're going to set up a Zapier Zap with a Patreon new patron trigger. And that trigger is going to create a MailChimp action that's going to add the patron as a subscriber. And then you're going to create a MailChimp onboarding campaign that has the welcome email. Now, let me just say, if that didn't make sense to you, don't worry. I'm going to walk you through it. That was I already know what I'm doing. I just need the high level summary with lots of jargon. So I'm going to be giving a jargon-free version of this as we go. And one other note, I'm using MailChimp as the example here, but you don't have to use MailChimp to do this. You can use any other email service, ConvertKit, Drip, ActiveCampaign, or all other email programs that I like. The reason I'm using MailChimp is, one, because it's free up to 2,000 subscribers, and it's the most popular. So I feel like if I'm going to use an example, I should use the most popular example. So without any further ado, let's talk about how to set up automated thank you emails. So step one is to sign up for Zapier. Zapier has the phrase API inside of it, and it's a service that connects other online services. It is the pipes of the internet, and it's not a very flashy service, but it's very, very useful, especially for this sort of thing. And they have a free forever plan, which should be enough for what you're wanting to do. So I'll have a link in the show notes to sign up for Zapier. If you use Zapier a lot, you may have to pay for the service, but they're not that expensive. How Zapier works is that you create a trigger in one app that then creates an action in another app. And Patreon has 3 triggers that it supports with Zapier right now. New pledge, so a new person has pledged to your campaign. An updated pledge, they've either raised their pledge amount or decreased their pledge amount. And delete pet pledge. Which is obvious. They've unsubscribed for one reason or another. And that action can cause results around the web if you set up Zapier. For example, Zapier can send out a tweet. So you can have a tweet automatically go out thanking your new patron for backing you. So the trigger, new pledge, would result in an action, send out a tweet. Now, I will say Zapier has the ability to send out emails itself. So if you're not concerned about building an email subscriber base, you actually can stop here at step 1 and use Zapier's built-in email tool. It's not as powerful as MailChimp, but if you're just giving somebody some coupon codes or some links or a simple thank you email, you can do all of that within Zapier's built-in system. It's very easy. So you would just sign up for Zapier, connect it with Patreon, and then select Zapier email as your action. But I'm going to assume that you're wanting to build an email list, that you're trying to build a business, and a good email list is a foundation of that business. And so the next thing you're going to want to do, if you haven't done this already, is to sign up for MailChimp. Now, like I said before, MailChimp's free up to 2,000 subscribers. Now, after 2,000 subscribers, you are going to need to pay. It's on the cheaper side of platforms. It's not the cheapest. It's also not the most powerful. It's very much a kind of middle-of-the-road email service. Tools like Drip and ActiveCampaign are a lot more powerful. They're also more expensive. And ConvertKit is both more powerful and simpler to use, but also more expensive. And kind of a hassle to sign up for. You have to actually talk to them on the phone. I'm not a fan of that, but I do have a lot of friends who are very happy users of ConvertKit. Now, there's a lot of tutorial videos and guides on how to sign up for MailChimp. I'm not going to go into that in much detail here, but I will have a link to a page how to sign up for a MailChimp account. If you're needing help with that, this gives you step-by-step instructions with screenshots. And of course, with all of these show notes, I have lots of links in this episode to show notes. Just scroll down, swipe down or left on your app, and you will find those. All right, so you signed up for MailChimp, you signed up for Patreon. It's time for step 3. You want to create a Zap between Patreon and MailChimp. Now, to start this step, the easiest way to do it is to use a Zapier recipe or template, and I'll have a link to that specific recipe in the show notes. So if you go to creativefundingshow.com/014 for episode 14, you'll be able to click on the exact recipe you want. And so then it's just a matter of clicking next a whole bunch of times if you use this recipe or template. Zapier is changing their vocabulary on that a little bit. But in short, you're going to need to verify your Patreon account and verify your MailChimp account. So it just means logging in and clicking a button that says, yes, this is my account. Yes, I authorize Zapier to control the account. And you want Patreon to be your trigger app, and you want MailChimp to be your action. Now, optional step here. We have a step 3.5. And I'll say I had to set this step up because we already use MailChimp for novel marketing. We already have an email newsletter. We already have a lead magnet that subscribers can sign up for. In fact, we have a bunch of different lead magnets. And, we do different ones every month, and you subscribe to get the free goodie that month. And we have a lot of subscribers already. And I didn't want our existing subscribers to get the thank you for becoming a patron email, because that would be weird. And they're not patrons, so they shouldn't be getting the discount. So what I did was I created a patron group inside of MailChimp. And I had the Zapier Zap not just subscribe new patrons to the list, but also put them in that group. And if they were already a subscriber, it would add them to the group. And Zapier makes that very easy. I just clicked the button that expanded the advanced options and selected the group in the advanced options. It's very straightforward. And if you need help creating groups in MailChimp, I've got a guide on that as well, link to. So MailChimp, one of the things I like about it is how well written their help documentation is. They have really good step-by-step instructions on how to do everything, which makes it really easy to recommend them because I can give links to specific steps and you can get a lot more on that step. So once you create the group, you'll want to make sure that the Zap adds new subscribers to that group specifically, like I said already. All right, so now let's go on to step 4, which is to create a MailChimp automation email. So now we have Zapier being triggered when somebody starts a new account and they insert that person into your group or into your list on MailChimp. Then what happens? Well, you're going to set up a MailChimp automation to send that person an email automatically. Now, MailChimp's automation is very powerful. You can do more than just send them an email right away. You can say, send them an email immediately, and then send them another email after 4 days, and then another email after 2 days after that. And you can set up what's called a drip sequence of multiple emails. But I'm not going to go into that. Right now, I'm going to assume you're just going to send one email. And I'll have a link to how to create an automatic welcome email in MailChimp. But basically, it's the same as you create any other email, except you're going to want to select an action to trigger it. So it's the same kind of idea of an automation. So we have the Zapier automation triggers a MailChimp automation. And the trigger that you want is subscriber added to the list, or if you're doing the group method, subscriber activity added to the group. And then as soon as that person's added to the group, you can set up the rules of when you want the email to go out. A couple of tips. I would recommend having the email go out immediately. You want people to get this thank you right away. I also recommend keeping your emails simple. Not a lot of fancy graphics. There was a trend in the early 2000s to send these really flashy emails with lots of templates and, graphics and sidebars and things like that. And now in the days of phones, people just want simple text and maybe some photos that stretch full width. Nothing fancy. I recommend that, not just for this email, but for all of your other emails. And then another thing that's important is you want to make sure your from name and email are recognizable. So if you're known as the Halo guy on your YouTube channel and you're John Smith in real life, and the people know you as the Halo guy, the email needs to come from the Halo guy in the from field. Otherwise, people are just going to be like, who's John Smith? So that's really important. For all email marketing, people really need to recognize the from field. It's more important, far more important than the subject. If you get an email from your significant other, you're going to read it regardless of what they put in the subject. Whereas you could get the most amazing email with the most compelling subject, but if you don't recognize who it's from, you're probably not going to open it. All right, so you create this email and you can test it, make sure that it works. MailChimp makes it really easy to send test emails and that it's beautiful and that the links work and you're good. And then step 5, which is optional, is you can write additional drip emails. So this is most helpful if you have a lot of complicated rewards. So let's say you're a podcast on Patreon and you have an RSS feed, a special patrons only RSS feed. You may want to have another email that comes out after a day or two, kind of explaining how that works, explaining where in Patreon to find their URL. That would be a good email number 2. And then the final step, step 6, is to set up an auto unsubscribe zap. This is totally optional. But when we talked about the triggers, there's a trigger for somebody becoming a new patron, but there's also a trigger for somebody ceasing to be a patron. So if you want to unsubscribe them from your super special email newsletter to stick it to them for not being a patron anymore, you can have that also happen automatically. It's the same idea as step 3, except the trigger action is somebody's deleting their patronage. And the action that you want in MailChimp is unsubscribe rather than subscribe. But other than that, it's just creating a second zap. And that's how you do it if you want to set this up with MailChimp. And again, these steps are almost identical if you're doing it in ConvertKit or any of the other services. I hope this has been helpful. I feel like quick communication from you is really powerful when it comes to having a good relationship with your patrons. They like to get that email. And another thing that's really fun about MailChimp is that you can mail merge. So if Joe Smith has become a patron, you can have the email be like, "Hi Joe, thank you so much for backing us on Patreon. I really appreciate it." And it's personalized, and you sign it, with your name at the bottom. That's a really powerful way to close it. And they've gotten a personal email from you. The reply email, if they hit reply, needs to go back to you. Don't be like, no reply at mydomain.com. No. You want to have that interaction. You want to have that engagement with your patrons. I've had some of the most pleasurable encounters I have with my patrons is, interacting with them on email, and they like me. Like the people who are backing you genuinely like you, or they wouldn't be giving you money, and you want to be able to get the nice emails that they're sending you. So make sure. And that's another reason why I like this whole process is that starts that conversation. And feel free in that welcome email to say, "Hey, reply to this email if you have any questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts or any comments," and get that relationship, get that engagement started. The more your patrons engage with you, the harder it is for them to unsubscribe later or to stop becoming a patron. They'll stick around for years if they've had even just 1 or 2 interactions with you. So I hope this deep dive has been helpful. We're still, experimenting with show formats, so do let me know in the comments if you like this deep dive. If you want us to do more deep dives on other topics, other subjects, I have pretty detailed show notes. So if you want to kind of read along, you can find those out. You can scroll in your app. I'll also have them at creativefundingshow.com. And of course, we are on Patreon. And this episode's kind of helped me realize one of the benefits of having a Patreon account for a show that's brand new, which is normally not a good idea, but it gives me one to experiment with. So I can play around with Zapier with my Patreon account for the Creative Funding Show without risking the big one for novel marketing. So I don't feel like it's fair to my co-host necessarily to use novel marketing as an experimentation test bed in case I break stuff. But I don't mind breaking it with you folks on the Creative Funding Show, because that's exactly what you're getting. That's the biggest benefit right now, is being a part of all of the experiments. So feel free to drop me a line. I'm Thomas Umstattd. Thank you for listening.